Hello everybody, welcome to the county seat today. I'm your host Chad Booth. We are bringing you our show from the headquarters of the Utah Association of Counties this week, and we are going to talk about the census. We are at the beginning of a new decade, and as prescribed in constitutional language, a census is to be taken to get a bead on what the population of the country is, what it's made up of. Now, you might not think this is important, but there are some very important facts, and we're going to find out about them, starting with this report from Maggie Kay.
Every 10 years, the census is an opportunity to provide population data to the federal government that becomes the basis for how many of the services provided by all levels of government get paid for. But in order for the calculations to work, everyone needs to be counted. It may be an oversimplification, but imagine trying to cook a meal for a group of people without knowing how many people are actually coming. An accurate count goes a long way towards making sure that everyone has enough to eat. Utah is the fastest growing state in the union. An accurate count ensures that infrastructure, funding, and representation within the state keep up proportionally with that growth. When people don't get counted, they get left out, and it impacts everyone around them as well as across the state. Here's how that happens. The census provides the baseline data for tracking economic development, calculating financial resources in a community, infrastructure, and what has happened during the past 10 years since the last census. Political representation is also based on census data. Congressional, legislative, and local elected district boundaries are all calculated off the census and become critical for representation, particularly in rural areas of the state. A relatively recent example, well, at least in census terms, was Utah not getting its 4th congressional seat in 2000 because we were 600 people short. Population numbers gathered by census data are also used to determine the class of a county. In fact, as Utah continues to grow, counties like Wasatch, Cache, Sanpete, Emery, Utah, and Grand are all looking at a change in class, which can make a big difference in how much state funding is available and even how state law applies to the county, depending on its class. At the national level, the census affects some $900 billion in grants, direct payments, loans, and loan guarantees that are distributed annually to states and individuals. For Utah, that ends up being $5.7 billion. Sales tax distribution, Medicaid, Medicare, funds for B&C roads, and PILT are all calculated from census data. As you can see, a lot of things are calculated from census data. So with so much at stake, the 7 to 9 questions for each person staying at your home on April 1st, 2020 isn't intrusive at all. If you think about it, the census isn't really learning anything that Google or Facebook don't already know. The government just needs to make it official because so much is riding on it. So that is why there is a big push for everyone to be counted once, only once, and in the right place, because you will all live with the results for a decade. For the county seat, I'm Maggie Kay.
Thanks, Maggie. So now let's take all these pieces and put them together. We'll join our panel of experts for a conversation when we come back on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the census. There's a lot of effort being put forth by the state to make sure that we get a complete count. As a matter of fact, the state has a complete count committee that has been organized with different departments to put them together. For our conversation today, we're joined by Mallory Bateman, who is with the Gardner Institute of Politics. We have Evan Curtis, who is with the State Office of OMB, and you guys are both part of the Triple C, as I call it. And we have Tammy Pearson, triple great commissioner from Beaver County, who's driven all the way up here to join us. Thank you. So obviously the state's taking this very seriously, and they've put together a committee. What is the purpose and what are the parts of the Triple C?
Yeah, so in the Complete Count Committee, it's just that. It's a group of people who want to make sure that we have a complete and accurate count of our state in the 2020 census. And so what we try and do is make it representative of the diverse population that we have in Utah, and we want to make sure that we have people who are leaders, who are ambassadors, and they do a couple of things. One, they're going to help us as a state make sure we're not missing anything. They help direct our efforts to make sure that our marketing and outreach efforts are going to resonate with every Utahn in the state. But then also we hope that they'll turn around and in turn go out and be the trusted voices in their own communities and to their own constituents and make sure that their groups are participating as well. And so again, we're trying to have people from the education world, from the communities of aging individuals, those who may be new to the state, whether they're from just outside of the state or whether they're just off the boat, they've never heard of the census before, such as refugees and others. And so we're really trying to get a very diverse group of people together to help us make sure we get a complete and accurate count.
Now, the committee is not necessarily conducting the census count, but just trying to prep people for it?
Yeah, so the complete count committees, so they're all over and at all different levels of government. Even, some organizations or school districts have started their own complete count committees. And basically we're kind of the local boots on the ground helpers for the Census Bureau, but the census itself is a federal program, so anyone that comes to your door with a census badge is a federal employee, but they're in charge of the actual count.
And part of what we're hoping to do at the state level too is beyond actually doing the work and doing a lot of things at the state level to get the word out, we're also hoping it's something of an example so that communities themselves can form their own complete count committees. And again, as Mallory alluded to, some businesses have started complete count committees and other organizations, and so it's nothing that you have to be invited to do by the Census Bureau. Anyone can get together and form their own complete count committee. We really just want to make sure that nobody is missed.
And so how do you interface with the census? Do you go say, hey, you missed these people over here? There is this town called Minersville. Make sure you get there. I mean, how does that work?
It's actually kind of interesting. So this is a little bit removed from the Complete Count Committee, but through another partnership with the Census Bureau, a count review program has just started today, kicked off, and it gives us at the Gardner Institute the opportunity to review the address lists that were submitted by us. We worked with AGRC, the state mapping entity, to submit a statewide address list. And then there were some other local address programs that the Census Bureau ran in the past couple of years. So we're kind of synthesizing everything, trying to make sure that no towns are missing, no new developments are missing, because we are a state that in a lot of areas do have some pretty crazy growth.
And I would imagine, like in Salt Lake County, it's wall-to-wall homes. And you just kind of start at Harriman and you work your way up and you've covered the county. Mm-hmm. But in your county, I mean, they don't count census on cows, and there's just a lot. There's a lot of space. Are you concerned about this in a county like Beaver, a fifth-class county?
Well, what's interesting, and we found this out a year ago at our National Association of Counties. They had the census people were there. The mailers and the notifications that are coming out. Most of rural Utah are P.O. boxes, and the mailers do not come to P.O. boxes. So the original mailers that most everybody's going to get delivered to their door is going to have to be hand delivered and taped to the door, or somebody knock on the door and hand it to you. So our area, our rural areas, which we're very concerned about, not only do we only have, like in Beaver County, we only have 3 actual towns. Mm-hmm. The rest of everything else is scattered, subdivisions and homes and farms and different things like that. So we're hoping that the addresses, they can find them.
they're just like places like Adams. There's a little sign, and they're
Adamsville.
They're Adamsville, they're like 2 or 3 houses,
Right.
and those have to be accounted for as well.
So we're on our county level. We actually I started our subcommittee last year and got a hold of the towns and the different little areas, our church groups and different things like that. We've got some bigger employers like Smithfield, and we're going to do a mailer and do some advertising through that with social media and train.
What kind of support does the state level CCC have with the counties and the communities and private organizations? Are you a coordinating body?
Well, to some extent, we're trying to provide resources and to be a resource for information. Certainly, if anyone has information, they can reach out and contact us. But also, for the first time ever, the legislature appropriated $1 million to the statewide Complete Count Committee. And so we're doing 2 things with that. It was appropriated, one for marketing and outreach, so we can get the word out. Because this is the first census that's ever been online, we want to make sure we have a digital presence, and people, when they open their web browser, they're starting to see information about the census coming up and how to take it. But also, and we're hoping with that we can reach the broadest number of Utahns possible.
A lot of people are worried about data. You know, do you need to worry about filling out the census form?
No. So census data is protected by Title 13. It's the code that everything in the Census Bureau operates under. And with that, you're not allowed to share any personal level information. Everything that the Census Bureau disseminates is kind of aggregated. And so right now there's actually, in the research world, they're talking about adding some noise to the data to make sure that it's extra secure so that people, if they have other data sets, can't match things up and figure out your basic details. But it's also, 10 questions, and they're very basic, they're very straightforward. It's your age, your race, your gender, your relationship within your household, your birthday so they can get your age, your address, if you own or rent. And so it's not a very invasive questionnaire.
It seems to me like 20, 30 years ago, there were a lot more questions on the census.
Yeah, so one thing that happened is there's the American Community Survey. There used to be the long form of the census that would go to 1 in 6 households. So if you did get a really long questionnaire once a decade, that's what that was. Now it's moved to the American Community Survey, so you still get a handful of people, I think it's like 2.5% of Utahns get this mailer throughout the decade, and that is a very long questionnaire that is very detailed and asks you about your heating fuel and how many bathrooms are in your house and your ancestry, all kinds of really detailed things. You should still answer that if you get it. It is an onerous, it is a big questionnaire, but those provide more of the characteristics of the population, but it's going to a much smaller sample than it used to in the past.
Great. We're going to take a break right here. When we come back, I would like to explore some of the challenges that you have and what people's reaction is to it and how you overcome it to get everybody to participate. We'll be right back talking about the census on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the census. It is that time. Every time there's a zero on the air, we have to zero in on the population. Well, that's kind of like a dad joke, wasn't it? Anyway, I would like to talk about why this big push. Why is this so important? What happens as a result of the census population? We alluded to it at the beginning, but I'd like some detail. You made a great presentation at the Rural Summit about this. Can you fill us in a little bit on that?
Yeah, so basically the census is our baseline for a lot of different data sets, whether it's private business, whether it's our school districts. At the Gardner Institute, we produce population estimates and population projections for the state, and so these census numbers are our baseline for that. So we're counting on this to be accurate so we can accurately look forward, kind of get an idea of what's going on, or look at the current time and adjust accordingly. And those end up impacting all kinds of things at the state level and the local level, different government spending or allocation programs, school lunch. I mean, everything from like kids' school lunch, children's health insurance, Medicaid, Medicare,
Federal funding.
Yeah. No, and it really is a big deal. It's over $5 billion of federal funds that comes to our state. 27% of our state budget is in federal funds. But what people oftentimes don't realize is also the distribution of our state sales tax as well. And so it really does have a big impact on really everybody in every community in the state, also with political representation. We're probably not likely to get an additional congressional seat this time. However, we're almost guaranteed to have some changes to our legislative districts. And so it really is going to have a big impact. And then, of course, talking about data, people don't realize how important that is for economic development as well. If you're a business and you're looking to locate somewhere, you want to know where your customers and where potential employees live.
Are you worried about this at a county level, that people just aren't going to respond and be left uncounted?
I'm concerned, yeah, and I think that's our job, on a commission level and just a leadership level, that you try and get that word out. One of the other things that it will also affect is your classification of counties, per population. And so there's a few counties that are right at that borderline, up or down or whatever. So, and that makes a big difference to us on our funding on a federal level with PILT or on a state level with BNC road funds for a rural county.
Are there any counties that are worried about going backwards if they don't get a good count? I mean, everybody thinks about, I'm a sixth, almost to a fifth. But does anybody think, well, if I don't get a good count, I may go from being a fifth back to a sixth, which would have a big impact, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it has a huge impact. I don't think that there's anybody probably, except for a lot of us, our famous quote is our biggest export is our children. And so some of the things that concerns us is we got a lot of kids in college. Well, they're not going to get counted at home. They're going to get counted wherever they're going to school at. And so there's a lot of those kind of things where people work out of town or work out of the county, and they get counted somewhere else.
Do you think that the census should have some kind of accommodation? This was kind of the issue in the last one. You got people at military bases that were counted in the census, and then overseas missionaries weren't. I think that was our big debate on that 4th congressional district, was it not?
Yeah, it was. And there's a lot of literature. The Census Bureau actually looked into it because that kind of triggered, should we count every American working abroad that's not under some kind of government contract or military contract? And it's so hard for them to even count Americans, any American abroad. We do have the benefit here of some really great record keeping for our young people that are living elsewhere, but not everyone has that capacity. And so, one thing to consider is with missionaries, we do have a lot of kids leaving, but then there are more coming in, in March or April. And so it's kind of a consistent turnover. It might not be allocated exactly the same, but the Missionary Training Center in Provo gets counted a certain way. It kind of gets counted like a university campus. So, that area is like booming with young people anyway. So, it's something that gets continued conversation, but they did change the residence rules, which regulate people living in unique situations with the military, with if you're stationed abroad or if you're, I can't remember the other words. So they adjusted that a little for this census, but I think the missionary question is so specific to us that I don't know that that's going to get addressed.
We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to pick up the conversation when we come back and focus on, well, what could go wrong. We'll be right back on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking about the census today, and this has been very informative. What could go wrong? I mean, what would be the worst case scenario that happened during a census?
A healthcare.gov, like everyone goes online at the same time and the whole thing falls apart because it is online this time. They have worked hard to try to ensure that won't happen, and they're planning on opening the portal earlier in March. So we've heard March 12th, but Census Day is April 1st. So that's also the reference point for the data. So
basically people have from the 12th of March to get online and fill this out. What if they don't have online?
If they don't have online, they'll get a couple more postcards, or if it's the update leave, which is leaving something at the door, I think they'll try to keep reaching out. You can also go on call and answer. They have a hotline you can call. And then eventually, if you get far enough down the postcard line, they will send you a paper form, and you can still mail that back in. But we're also leaning on our libraries, our community centers, and a lot of the local complete count efforts.
So what happens if somebody says, I'm not answering, and April 1st comes and they haven't participated? Then what happens?
If they wait till the end of April, they will probably get a knock on the door from a census employee.
Yeah, and that will take place in May, and so they should watch out for that. But really, we hope everyone is going to take the opportunity. It's going to be easier than ever to participate in the census because it is online. You can pick up your phone and complete it relatively quickly. We're hoping everyone gets that message and participates. If everyone understands how important it is to their community, that it is safe, that it's easy, and how important it is, we hope they just go on and participate.
What happens if somebody says, I want to change the profile of my county, and they try and fill out the census more than once because they can get to it on their phone? Can that happen?
That can't, I mean, they could theoretically fill out the form a bunch of times, but if a bunch show up in funny addresses that don't match in the Census Bureau system, or they don't match up with other data that they're combining, it'll get chucked. So don't try to game the system. Just go for your household, get everyone in your household counted, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore for 10 years.
Let's make sure we've got all these last details covered as far as if you don't have online, what do they do?
You can call on the phone, and that number will be available. 2020census.gov is a great place to find information, or as Mallory mentioned, you'll be able to mail the form in as well, request a paper form. So there are several options if you're not comfortable with online, but again, there's plenty of options. You can go to a library, you can go to a school, and get online if you need to as well.
As a local elected official where government really happens, Tammy, last word goes to you. Why? Tell me your encouragement for people in your county or all rural counties.
I think it's important that we stand up and have a voice, that they know that there are people south of Nephi and or outside of the Wasatch Front.
I was going to say, the guys in Rich County are going to be picking up the phone.
I know, I better clarify that. No, but it's important that we have our voice and that we're heard. And I do have to say that the state's done a good job to get that message out. The first time I had a question, they sent somebody down to talk to us, and that was almost a year ago. And they've showed us been good examples on getting those messages out and giving us examples for messaging.
Any last tips, Mallory? Anything we should cover?
If you do have any questions, feel free to give me a call. My information's on the Gardner Institute website, but happy to help however I can.
And I would just say to all of our county leaders, leverage those trusted voices like our commissioner here. That's who people trust, and that's who they'll follow.
Well, don't be afraid of this. It's not going to hurt you. It's not a conspiracy. They're not going to be people. Well, there will be people showing up to get the census, but there won't be people showing up later because you said something in there. It's harmless and it's helpful. Just remember, this is all part of that bigger picture of how government happens close to home, and you should be involved. You should be part of the solution. To help the census out, share this information with your friends, and I please encourage you to join us on social media to follow all the topics that affect local government, because not all of them get to be on the show. We'll see you next week on The County Seat.